Thank you, sir.
Hi, how are you? I'm Brian.
I'm here.
I bet you're proud. Yeah.
I want to see that baby.
Okay, well, she's not here.
I want to hold that baby.
Come on this afternoon?
Take the water out.
Yeah, let's go.
We're going to let everyone finish your conversations and take your time. This is such a joyous day. I was trying to think of how I was going to do a segue into our Bible class today, and I thought about you sit down and you eat a sweet roll and have some coffee. Well, that's what we just had, a sweet roll and coffee. Now we're going to have beef broth. Anyway, that may get us into it. We're in the book of Judges, and we're going to talk about Samson today. There are a few judges that ruled such a short time that they're not mentioned, not a lot mentioned about them. It's in chapter 12, verses 8 through 15. And if you have your Bible today, you might want to follow along. I'll be using my paper Bible today, so you might want to follow along. But you have Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. And Ibzan, 7 years, Elon, 10 years, and Abdon, 8 years. Now, there's not much said about those three judges. We don't know a lot about them. But there's a lot said about the one that we're talking about today, Samson. I just wondered, though, I tried to find out where Elon Musk got his name. It's a Hebrew word, Elon, and it means oak tree or terebinth tree or some kind of tree. They have trouble nailing down the meaning of those Hebrew words as far as what tree it is. Does anybody know where he got his name? Anybody read a biography of his life? He was born in South Africa, and he didn't want to participate at that time. They had the apartheid going on where they had the races separate. He didn't want to participate in that, so he came to Canada, and I think it's where he went to school. I didn't find out where he got his name, though, so that may be something that I can look up later. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. When we look at this period of time, again, we want to remind ourselves that everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And the question that I wanted to ask you to think about as we go through this is, can God use people to serve him if they're good and obedient? And the opposite of that is, can God use people to serve him if they're not good and obedient? So that's the primary one that I wanted to ask. Let's look at chapter 13 of Judges. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, I'm not sure what the 40 years is speaking about there, because if you look at this period of time that the judges were ruling Israel, that doesn't quite match up. But at the apparently the 40 years ended during the time of Samuel. And so if you look at 1 Samuel about chapter 7, then there's a note there that at that time Israel won back the cities that they had lost to the Philistines. But as we know, even into David's reign, they had trouble with the Philistines. So during the months before Samson was born, his parents had an angel who would visit them. This angel is called the angel of the Lord. First visited Samson's mother, and Samson's mother is not named. His daddy is Manoah. So it always refers to her as Manoah's wife or Samson's mother. So we don't know her name. But she said he was very awesome. And the angel of God, the angel of Jehovah, was familiar to the Jews. And so this heavenly being, whoever he might be, visited the mother of Samson before Samson was born. Just in passing, I wanted to mention the angel of the Lord is referred to in Hagar's encounter. She's in the wilderness and she's in a bad place. She's depressed because she's been sent away from her home. And she's in the wilderness there. And the angel of the Lord spoke to her. And the angel spoke in the first person. He says, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Now, would an angel, a mere angel, speak in that way? Well, you know, it's assumed by some people that this was actually an appearance of Christ before he was born, a pre-incarnate Christ. A mere angel would not speak in this way, some would say. Now, we might argue that he was given the right to speak in the first person. In other words, I will increase your descendants. And that could be true. But Hagar called him the God who sees. And so there's a very strong case to be made that this angel who appeared to the wife of Manoah before Samson was born was actually Jesus Christ before he came to this earth. Just in passing, the word angel and the angel of the Lord is mentioned in this chapter over and over again. If you mark that in your Bible, you'll see that. In other places, the word the angel of the Lord appears in the book of Zechariah, for instance. And in other places, we see the angel of the Lord appearing. So she told her husband that she didn't get his name and she didn't know where he was from, but the angel did tell her that she'd have a son. And he said that her son must not drink any intoxicating drink and that he should not eat anything that's unclean. In some versions, it indicates that he should not even eat anything from the grapevine, any grapes or anything like that. And then he goes on later on to tell her that she should not do these things. She should not drink any intoxicating drink, and she should not eat anything that's unclean. So the word Nazarite comes up. The word Nazarite means an unpruned vine. So it's a very fitting that it's called that because obviously Samson, any Nazarite, John the Baptist, none of these people were affected by the things that other people are affected by. So an unpruned vine. Manoah, being a man of faith and not doubting the message, asked God to send the man of God so that he could teach them how to parent their son. In other words, if we're going to have a son and he's going to be special to your use, special in your sight, then I wish you would send the man of God back to me, the angel of the Lord, so that I can ask him some questions. So God allowed this request. sent the angel of God back to Manoah's wife. And again, it's interesting that the angel appears to her and not to Manoah. But at this point, Manoah's wife comes and gets him, and they run to where the angel was. He asks two questions: how will the child live, and what should he do? In verse 12 of chapter 13. Manoah's wife herself was given the same restrictions, as we said, placed upon the child. Manoah wanted to show his hospitality to the angel of the Lord, but the angel said, even if you try to detain me, I won't eat anything. But if you would, offer a sacrifice to the Lord. The writer explained that Manoah didn't know what he was speaking, that he was speaking to an angel. That's the interesting thing about narratives in the Bible. Sometimes there will be the author, the writer, will make a comment to help you to understand, as John did when he spoke to the woman at the well. He explained the Jews don't have any dealings with the Samaritans. So when Manoah asked him his name, the angel said that his name was, in the English Standard Version, it has wonderful. My name is wonderful. In the King James Version, my name is secret. And the NIV has, my name is beyond understanding. Now, the original language there, the original word, is the same word that's used in Isaiah chapter 9, I believe in verse 6, where Isaiah prophesies the coming of the Messiah. And he said, his name shall be Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting God, Prince of Peace. So the word that's used in this context, where the angel says, my name is wonderful, or my name is incomprehensible, is the same word that's used in that passage in Isaiah. Well, the couple said, we're doomed. We've seen God. It's all over. But of course, that didn't happen. Samson grew. At the end of the chapter, the comment is made that Samson grew and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him, and the word indicates a compelling or even a kind of, you might say conniption, or a kind of fit that would come over Samson at this time. So Samson had a strong desire to rid his people of the Philistines once and for all. And we're in number 3 up there, Samson's plan against the Philistines. Seems to indicate that he had this plan, and that may have been the reason why he decided to go down to marry a woman of the Philistines. If you read the account here. Now, this may be something that he just decided to do, because it's not the Lord's idea that his people should marry outside of the Jewish religion. So he compelled his parents and said, I want you to go with me. I want this woman. They tried to talk him out of it, but they went on their way to Philistia to marry this woman. Now, the narrator explains that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines in chapter 14 and verse 4. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. Now, that goes back to the question that I asked you. Is God able to deal with people who are unfaithful, people who are disobedient? And so that kind of goes to answer that question. As he's going down, they get separated evidently, and there's a lion that comes rushing out, and he kills the lion with his bare hands. And then he doesn't mention this to his parents. Now, the reason why this is important is because it gives him an idea for a riddle, and this riddle is important. During the time when they were getting ready for this marriage ceremony, he began his plan. He carried out his plan. He said that he made a bet to his Philistine companions that had been assigned to him, apparently. And he said, you can't guess this riddle that I'm going to give you. And they made a deal. I'll give you changes of garments, I think is what they bet. But they couldn't guess the riddle. They didn't know what the riddle was about until they went to the woman that Samson was supposed to marry, and they threatened her. Either you tell us what this riddle means, or else we will burn your family, your father's house, and all your family. And so she finds out and tells them what this means. And of course, Samson's upset about that, but there's not a lot he can do about it. So his next plan, and he's just kind of, it almost seems like he's mischievous and adventurous. But he has this idea, I'm going to rid our people of the Philistines. And so he catches 300 foxes and ties their tails together. And I don't know how he did this. It must have been some kind of a miraculous or supernatural thing that happened there, because he would have had to have a lot of people to help him to do this. But anyway, he ties the tails together. They run out through the fields of the Philistines and set fire to the grain. The Philistines were upset about that. Who has done this? In verse 6 of chapter 15. Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite. He didn't marry this woman. I don't know how they missed that, but unless there was some kind of custom that made them think that he did. But they go and burn her and her father with fire. Now, before that, she had been offered to someone else. So Samson wouldn't even marry to her. So they avenged themselves by attacking the tribe of Judah. The men of Judah became upset about that. Samson was hiding in a cave there. And so they go to Samson and say, you've messed up. You've got us in trouble with Philistines. And so he makes a deal with him. He says, don't you attack me, but I'll let you bind me. And so there's a lot made of these new cords. So they bound him with these new cords, the cords that had not been used. And so they bring him down there. He breaks the cords, and with the jawbone of a donkey kills 1,000 men. Now, one commentator that I read suggested that this donkey's jawbone was only about 9 inches long. So, the whole point with what Samson is doing here is that God is with him. God is accomplishing the jawbone of a donkey. And that the place where that happened is called Ramath Lehi, the hill of the jawbone. Now God provided water for Samson. Samson asked for water. God provided water from a rock. And so God is still merciful to Samson. God is helping Samson out. Chapter 16 and verse 1 through 3. He goes down to Gaza to a prostitute there. And while he's there, sometime during the night, the Philistines are waiting outside there. And he goes out, picks up the gate of the city, and carries it 40 miles. And it's suggested that the gate of the city weighed 400 to 500 pounds. But he carries it from Gaza to Hebron, and that's the distance of 40 miles. So, you kind of see that this man is doing some supernatural things here. And so then we have Samson and Delilah, and I'm going to move pretty quickly through this material. In chapter 16, and beginning in verse 4 through 21, as you realize, there are 4 attempts that Delilah makes to find out why Samson is so strong. How can he do all these things? Well, she asks him, she tries to butter him up. The Philistines have already asked her to seduce him and see where his great strength lies. So they offer her 1,100 pieces of silver, and she says, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you." Samson says the first thing, he says, 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried. The Philistines come in there to catch him. He snaps the bowstrings like a thread of flax when it touches the fire. So the secret of strength was not known. She says, "Behold, you've mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound." And this time he says, "New ropes, not been used." Well, that's already been tried if the Philistines knew that, but they apparently didn't know it. So Delilah tells them, "I found out." The Philistines come to catch him, and then he snaps the ropes from his arms like a thread. The third try, he says, "Weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with a pin." So evidently she had one of those machines that you use to weave cloth. And so he was lying there. She separated his hair into 7 threads, wove it into a piece of cloth, and then somehow pinned it somewhere, used a pin there. Well, the Philistines come in again. He woke up, broke all that apart, and got away. Well, as we know, the 4th time, she says, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You've mocked me these 3 times, and you've not told me where your strength lies." She pressed him hard with the words day after day, urged him, his soul was vexed to death. I don't understand this. I don't understand him even telling her the first time, but he seemed to be kind of a trickster and kind of an adventurous person. But he had told her 3 times. He knew what was going to happen. I don't understand why he told her this 4th time and told her the truth, except for the fact that maybe he had such pride and such arrogance that he had grown to think that, hey, God's not doing this. I'm doing it. That's the only thing I can figure. So he tells her the truth. She has his head shaved. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of Philistines, saying, "Come up again. He's told me all his heart." They come in, take Samson into custody, you might say. They seized him. They gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza, bound him with bronze shackles. In verse 22 of chapter 16, it says, "But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved." And this is like in good stories, you try to include something that is a foreshadowing of something that is to come. So we know by this remark that the writer says here that, hey, this is not over yet. The hair began to grow again. So to end the narrative part, Samson is brought out on display to entertain the Philistines in the pagan temple. And you've seen the movies Between Two Pillars of the temple, and he can't see. He asks one of the people there, "Am I close to the supports of the temple?" And so he puts Samson's arms on the temple. Samson pushes them and dies. And the Bible says that he killed more people in his death than he killed in his life. So I want to move on to some applications that we can make from the life of Samson. We'll talk about God's sovereignty first. And Proverbs 16:4. I love this verse because it goes to the question that I asked before. And the comment is made here by Solomon, the Lord has made everything for its purpose. The Lord has made everything for its purpose. God's sovereignty. He has a right to do that. He has the power to do it. He has the will to do it. The Lord has made everything for his purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. And so that's the first thing that we want to bring out about the life of Samson. If you put someone's life on a continuum, and over here at one is pure as the fallen snow. I mean, baby pure, done nothing wrong, good heart, obeys the rules, does good to people, merciful, kind. Number one. If you go along that continuum to come over here on a 10, and that is the worst scoundrel that ever walked the earth. I mean, just kicks little puppy dogs, does awful things. If you put Samson on that continuum, I would put him, where would you put him? Maybe a 4 or a 5 or something like that. I mean, hey, if you put me on that continuum, and of course, again, it goes back to the question that I ask. If a person is a rotten scoundrel, will God use him? Well, the passage here says he will. He'll use him for his own purpose. So, in the book of Proverbs, we're told that God has created everything for a purpose. God has created even the wicked, and they will serve his purpose. When we think about this, it doesn't say that God created them wicked. In other words, it doesn't teach original sin. These people decide to be wicked, and if you look people in the world and ask them, is God using you to accomplish his will? They would say, no, I don't even believe in God. Well, do they know what they're talking about? Not really. Because God is sovereign. He does what he wants to do. Let's look in the book of 2 Timothy here. There's a passage in 2 Timothy that's fascinating. Paul says, now in a great house, there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay, some for honorable use, some for dishonorable. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonorable, he will be a vessel for honorable use, set apart as holy, useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. Now, I think about the pots and pans in our kitchen. And those pots and pans are used to cook our food. We want them clean. We want them pristine. But there are also some vessels that may be under the sink, there, and we don't use those to cook our food in because they're not very clean. So we might use them for other purposes, and that's why I think of here when Paul writes this in 1 Timothy, in 2 Timothy. Now, most wicked people, again, would not realize that they're serving God's purpose, but they are. And most people wouldn't realize that we're just vessels. As Paul points out in his Roman letter, actually I think it's in 2 Corinthians. But we have this treasure. He's talking about the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. So the treasure of the gospel has been put in this vessel of clay. And in Romans chapter 9 and verse 21, Paul points out that God has the right because he is the potter. He makes the pot. He takes the clay and forms it. And if he chooses to make a pot that's marred and imperfect, then that's what he does. That's what his will is. But the people, in in the early church were looking at what Paul was saying, and they questioned that. In verse 14, chapter 9, is there injustice on God's part? By no means. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. He goes on to talk about Pharaoh. So they ask the question, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out the same lump, one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? So as you think about all the people that God dealt with in the Bible, think about all the ones who were on that continuum. They were somewhere even near the 10 here, the rascal. You look at Moses. Someone pointed out that he was a murderer. You look at David. He was an adulterer. So can God use imperfect vessels? Yes, he can. And quickly, when we accomplish something, we must give God the glory. You remember Gideon started out with 32,000 soldiers. Some of you can go home because you're afraid. 22,000 left. 10,000 left. Gideon said, okay, let's go into battle. This is not good, but because there were like 120,000 Midianites. Anyway, got down to 300 soldiers. God claimed the victory. Gideon knew that to be so. I'm about to wrap this up here because I'm running out of time. God said to Paul, you know, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. You think about Samson on the movie, The Life of Samson. He was, they say, buff, you know. He had muscles all over the place. Well, I don't think so. I think Samson looked like me, probably. And if you see my arms, you know that I don't have a lot of muscles. Now, why would I say that? I don't know what he looked like, really. He may have been muscular. But the point I'm making is that God takes a weak vessel and he uses it for his purpose. And so, to wrap this up, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32, there is a passage there that where the Hebrew writer names off some individuals that served him by faith. What more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness. Made strong out of weakness. And so this is the prayer that I have, that God will use my life for good, even though I am a weak and imperfect vessel. Thank you for listening.